Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Dave Dale.
And I'm Scott Clark. Today we're talking with Bill Steer and Parker Robinson about the vision, the dream for some people to actually take 4 school boards and bring them down to 1. Why is this, it seems obvious that we should do something like that, efficient-wise, but why is it so hard, Dave?
Well, the why is interesting, and we discussed it pretty thoroughly in the thing. There's a lot of different things in play. That's why he's actually starting with just study it and see what happens and see what efficiencies you can be found, and not just go to 1. But eventually, you really have to look at...
Do you think, because when Parker's here and he's a representative of the teachers union,
secondary teachers,
secondary teachers union, and he said it's in our mandate that we support everybody coming down to 1 school board and that. Do you think he would? I never asked this question, but do you think he would be different if, let's say, the Catholic board says we'll do it as long as our teachers union. We don't lose our teachers union, or your union folds into ours? I don't think. Then he would be all off it now, right?
I think the unions would find a way to separate themselves and share some consolidations. Now, if the unions did what they're saying and practice what they preach, they wouldn't have as much overhead right? They could actually make some efficiencies as well. So as the boards go, would they be for it? I don't know. They would be saying, well, I'm not sure how much efficiency can be found, but that's what needs to be studied. Maybe there's efficiencies the unions can find too.
Well, that's coming up first. We're going to talk to them. We're going to talk about some local, there's actual local things that have happened where we didn't really leverage the efficiencies we could have had with the multiple different school boards, and that took place like in West Nipissing and Mattawa, and those stories are coming up. But first, we want to remind all of you that are listening and watching us to make sure that you interact with our content. So we love to hear everything you're feeling and seeing and hearing, and tell us what you're thinking about, because we actually read all your comments and we like to talk about them here as well. So do that. And if you're watching us on YouTube now, just hit that subscribe button, because that helps us a great deal. And this show wouldn't happen in any way without our tremendous sponsors that have come on board. And today's sponsor is Twigs Coffee Roasters.
North Bay Echo is proud to partner with Twigs Coffee Roasters, a part of the community since 1995. Twigs offers a wide selection of quality beans, fresh roasted in-house every day. Find your favorite specialty drinks at our espresso bar. Rejuvenate with freshly squeezed juice, or treat yourself to mouth-watering selections from our gourmet deli. And don't forget our irresistible fresh baked goods, including uncompromising gluten-free options. Twigs has 5 locations to serve you, from North Bay to Sturgeon Falls to Sudbury. Order online for pickup at twigs.ca. And coming soon, you'll be able to order fresh roasted coffee beans direct to your doorstep from our distribution center in North Bay.
Well, I actually have an example of people giving us feedback from our newsletter, and I wanted to talk about it here. Elizabeth Appleton emailed, and it was in regard to the newsletter story that talked about there's a story about a homeless person, I'll put air quotes, just because dying on the streets of North Bay, linked to a regional story about increased homelessness. And there's a bit of blowback to that story, because the person wasn't actually homeless. She actually had a residence. She rented somewhere. She just, I talked to the reporter involved, and she explained that her information from people that do work on the streets and help people that are transition in and out of homelessness, that they knew her. She's got unstable housing. They figured, and that justifies the headline as far as the reporter's concerned. I suggested that that's not necessarily, that's an expansion of that headline. Homelessness is whether you have no choice, nowhere to go, I think, other than one-off night.
If someone's couch surfing, is that homeless?
Well, they have no home to themselves. There's no place they can call their own. So I would say that they would be counted as homeless. They're just not on the streets homeless.
Right.
Yeah.
So why has this become so? Why is it such a big issue? Like, that tragically this woman, died on the streets. Turns out she did have a residence.
Mm-hmm.
Local reporter says the person is homeless. Why is this such a big? Why is it such a big issue?
Well, I'll take from the words of the person that made a post anonymously. I mean, that's another issue, but anonymously they posted on that North Bay Complaints Facebook page that they fear that the family, even though the name may not have been linked to the story, everybody kind of knew who she was, family-wise, and to be called homeless is not exactly what they want their mother to be remembered for. That also, it's inaccurate. And the person said that this is an example of why we don't trust the media, because a situation was used to back up a story that wasn't true, right? I suggested to the reporter that at the very least they should check that headline, because that was shared provincially, right? Homeless person found dead in North Bay, and we have a lot. Like, that's not true necessarily, right? That's a broadening of the definition of homelessness. The person had a place to stay, right? And it's a matter of, this person was saying that you can't trust the media because of this type of stuff, right? So it is important.
Yeah. So, and why wouldn't, I think you might have answered this already, but why wouldn't, you said you talked to the reporter, why wouldn't the person change their stance on it?
Well, they think that unstable housing,
enough.
That's homeless enough, right? And then that's her position, but it's not explained in the story, right? And I think people are demanding the media be very straightforward and clear about what they're reporting, and any smell of it, a headline being tweaked for attention, and that it's not totally accurate, gives people less reason to trust the local media. But or mainstream media.
But I'm sure in your tenure as a journalist, you've, I'll say, tweaked headlines at different times to, you pull people into the story. That's
not without having a factual basis for it. It always has to have a factual basis. You can pump up the message in the headline so it's interesting, but it still has to reflect fact. I'll tell you what would happen if I was at the Nugget and I reported that the person was homeless. I had a managing editor, a publisher, and a city editor, and my story said she was homeless, and the next day they found out she had a residence.
Yeah, what would happen?
There would be an immediate correction in the newspaper saying the person wasn't homeless, they had a residence. And they would change, if they had a digital product, they would change that to reflect that online, because it's not accurate. And it was very important. Post Media and the Nugget don't have that layer of management right now. And so the gatekeepers of fact are no longer there to make that correction.
There must be a gatekeeper of fact.
Well, I guess we'd have to go up further
today
into the Post Media chain and say, hey, this needs to be changed online. But, who has time to correct everything on the mainstream media?
Interesting.
Anyways, it's an example for a conversation, whether or not who's right.
Did you think, because I'm sensing that maybe you didn't get along with this reporter?
I worked with the reporter for a long time.
And that the reporter might have said, okay, since Dave's asking me, I'm going to say no, or I'm going to solidify my stance here.
Well, no, I think the stance was solidified long before that, because it was a week before I messaged the reporter. Right?
Okay. So this had already been...
she had already saw the anonymous complaint, and she had that complaint about the anonymous complaint was that I'm not going to bother dialogue about an issue coming from somebody that doesn't put their name to it. As I told somebody as we were discussing it, there's a lot of ex-journalists in town. We talked about this. That's true. Anonymous is a problem. I don't believe in anonymous complaints. I don't think people should be able to talk specifically about an individual without putting their own name to it. But I also believe that there's too many stories being published using anonymous sources. So that's a hard argument if you're using anonymous sources for your stories.
Yeah, but in only because I watched All the President's Men. You have to go back in the 70s for that one. The anonymous, even though the source is anonymous, the reporter knows who the source is, right? Or are you saying reporters are taking today anonymous sources and not checking who the anonymous is?
No, they know who the anonymous person is, but they permission from an editor to use an anonymous source was discussed with more than just one person making the decision, and it was very rare.
Oh, really?
Very rare. Very rare. It was only when it was really important. Why would it be so rare? Because people want to know who's saying what, because we know that everybody has a stake in things. So it was very rare. You wouldn't get a letter to the editor with an anonymous.
No.
Wouldn't happen. There was probably a couple incidences. I can only remember a very popular column in Northern Times in Kapuskasing. They had someone writing a column that was an insider at City Hall, and that was anonymous. But very few examples of that. Very few. When I was coming up through, I tried to get anonymous sources involved with stories, and I was rejected for a good cause. Because it wasn't important enough for that person's identity to be protected. Business associations and possible loss and all that that's not a good enough excuse. You'd have to be under a threat of death, right? That kind of thing.
Okay, I always thought...
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I had always thought that that was used quite often, anonymous sources, as long as they were verified, through the chain of command that a newspaper would have. But now I'm sort of surprised. It was very rare that you would do that, because once you go down that path, then now there's legal issues that are about to happen too, right? Because you're going to be challenged on who the anonymous source is. So that company has to invest in the litigious nature of reporting like that.
I think anonymous sources can provide you information that you need to go corroborate with people that are willing to go on the record, and you need to substantiate what's being said as fact, right? And you just can't say this person said, I'm going to protect them because I think they wanted it. That's not good enough, I don't think. And it's a bit of a trend now of anonymous stuff is more and often being pulled into stories and being allowed because the retribution online and the doxing is actually a different threat than we used to have, right? So things have changed in the landscape, but anonymous sources is another issue. I don't think Facebook should allow it on its pages. I've never thought that anonymous was good.
Yeah. Well, we have a great show coming up, and we have people at play, and we don't have any anonymous sources. This is right from the horse's mouth coming up in just a second. But before we get there, it's not an anonymous source. This is Scott saying it. It's time to Toyota at North Bay Toyota. I don't know if that's a good segue or not, but
good enough.
Good enough. Well, I'm a Toyota fan. Hey, they have some really good deals on the 2025 Toyota Tundra double cab SR4 four-wheel drive, which is perfect at this time of the year. I was heading down to Bracebridge last week, and there was cars all in the ditches. I just switched into my four-wheel drive on my Toyota Tundra, and I got there safe. So if you want to experience their ingenious levels of capability, technology, and refinement, make sure you get into one today. Or maybe you're an SUV lover. Take advantage of a limited shipment of 2025 RAV4s and discover the perfect blend of style, comfort, and efficiency in a compact SUV that ignites your desire to explore in the snowy, chilly north that we have. It's time to Toyota at North Bay Toyota, 640 McEwen, or online at northbaytoyota.com for details.
Today we're going to talk about a recent motion that passed at the Near North School Board to look at the efficiencies of school boards and see if there can't be some savings, some ways of going about it. And it's not necessarily about changing things to one school board, it's about finding efficiencies. And our guest today, we have Bill Steer, welcome to the studio that you're very familiar with.
Thank you.
He's on the board with the Near North. And we have Parker Robinson, who's president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
You have a lot of background and history about this particular topic?
I have some knowledge of this topic. I've held different positions in my union and in other organizations that relate to the topic, yes.
Can I use humor? Because it sounds funny. Finding efficiencies in a school board, like, stop it. Like, what's going on here? And we have the union president that's leading the conversation. Stop it. It's craziness. What are you guys talking about, efficiencies in the school board?
Well, it's not funny at all, Scott. It's something that I think's long overdue, and it's a historical topic that's been brought forward before. But the word efficiency may or may not be the right word, but it's about looking at our 4 school board system and seeing how we could do things collectively, cooperatively, and better to pass on monies saved to student success and well-being.
I think it's a great conversation to have. And I'll just tell a story from years back. I used to be on radio at one time, and I was asked by the Federation to come and moderate a debate for the Near North District School Board and the different directors. Is it directors? No, trustees. Trustees, right? And when I did my research, I went in, first of all, of all the ones that were debating, there was only like 2 that weren't insane. And there was hardly anybody in the audience.
Did that include Bill?
No, this is many years ago. I think Bill was still in high school. But the thing that actually concerned me as someone who's voting was I discovered in that process that the Near North District School Board has a larger budget than the city of North Bay. And we have four school boards, and they're not all that big, but I would think the Catholic board must be massive too. Like it's a huge footprint they have. And so the inefficiencies in all of that and how taxpayers don't lean in and say, hey, or, Bill, do what you do, like taking the time to actually, put their name forward, to get in there, to be part of it. The efficiencies must be massive if we could bring those 4 school boards together.
I'll let Parker answer that first.
Well, I know Bill's motion is politically sensitive, and he's not saying it, but I will let the panel here know that the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation has had a longstanding 1 school board policy in our organization. Now, our policies are sort of guiding documents, directions, values that we share as an organization. And in 2016, a policy was passed that the government should transition to 1 school system with a French and English component in the province.
Why is it? The part I can't wrap my head around would be why it's so politically sensitive.
Well, it's politically sensitive because if you're a Catholic or French-speaking, those are enshrined in the Constitution and Charter of Rights. So
right.
Those are difficult things to challenge, I guess. But maybe we've read legal articles saying it's not so difficult. Other provinces have done it. So
didn't Quebec do it?
Parker can explain this one.
How could Quebec, who I would think is quite a strong Catholic province, I would say, how could their public and Catholic education come together? You would think that would be like a large divide.
Yeah, no, and I thought the same thing when I heard that Quebec had transitioned. Now, Quebec's protections are for the Protestant system. Well, they no longer exist. It's a secular system in Quebec because they were able to make the change. The change is pretty straightforward, as I understand it. Certainly not a lawyer, but Section 93 is the governing part of the Constitution or the BNA Act. I'm not sure which one. And that can provinces can request an amendment to that so that they don't have to fund multiple systems. And Quebec did that. So they make the amendment and the request to the federal government, and the federal government can approve that.
So in Quebec, is there only one?
There's only secular school system in Quebec.
There's only one. That's incredible. And we have 4 in this province.
There is French and English.
Yeah.
But there's no Catholic or
any
Protestant
other
system.
province that has 4?
Alberta has a Catholic system. I don't know if they have 4. They certainly have 2.
In Alberta, and the rest, I think, in Ontario, and the rest are, I think, more publicly funded, as in all in one. There may be some nuances, but it's the interesting thing that you don't understand, Scott, is that because like we don't put partitions in our minor sports teams in hockey and soccer, and we don't put them in our municipalities, and we don't put them in most colleges and universities. So why do we do that in education? Why can't we provide those services which are enshrined in the Constitution and the Charter of Rights under one building to be more efficient?
So let me go back in time. I don't know who can chime in with this because Dave follows politics quite well. When John Tory ran provincially, he wasn't saying to under one school board. He was saying something very different, and that was like it seemed like the third rail he touched, and he wouldn't get away from it. And he really lost his chance at a leadership race. So, what was it again he was asking, and why that fell flat?
Well, opposite to what OSSTF's policy position is and sort of what the conversation's revolving around here is Tory's suggestion was that all faiths should be funded in their own school system. So if the Jewish school system, Muslim school system, Catholic,
That
obviously.
would be massive.
And yes, and so people were aghast at this at the time. I think he was leading in the polls for that election, 2007
well,
or
if
something.
you ask Bill Freebosch, who was a longtime mayor out in East Ferris, he was running for MPP that year, and he blames that particular platform plank for his defeat against Minnick Smith.
I don't think he's wrong in stating that either.
He was very
I
close to
remember,
getting elected.
Yeah, it was. So that seems crazy to me. Then now, because it's the complete opposite of what you're saying. So where does, I know you touched on it briefly, but why is there such hesitation in doing this? Because as you said, it's enshrined in 1867 in our Constitution, and some have said we'd have to change the Constitution, but you, Parker, had mentioned that no, it's just an amendment that's happened in other provinces. It seems like the people, I would think, at each school board would want, because there's a bunch of people who'd probably lose their jobs.
Well, I'll just throw this in from my perspective. From the Catholic vote is very strong, and the Catholic system schools are winning the challenge of competing for students right now, and they get a little bit more than others compared to the public system.
Yeah,
so they're winning. They're not going to give up.
Yeah,
right. It works for them.
So the Catholic system doesn't want this.
I think they're fine.
I would suggest they do not want the elimination of their school system. No, I don't think they'd be in support of that.
And
so you got
is
English
it the same
Catholic
union
and
as
French
yours?
Catholic.
No. So
so different unions.
Yeah,
too.
Catholic
That's
teachers
complex.
have their own union. All 4 school boards are represented by parts of the 4. We have 4 education unions in our province.
Yeah, I don't think you'd lose any teachers. I think it would be upper administration and trustees, and of course that would be a whole different model. But nothing else, and then you'd have more money again for student success and well-being, and less for the top, so to speak. But again, it's efficiencies. But your question was, it's a very sensitive topic based on religion and freedom of speech and the French language being enshrined in our Constitution.
Right.
I mean, I can give you 2 examples locally of efficiencies. So I'm from Sturgeon Falls. I attended Northern Secondary School as a student. I taught there my whole career until I've taken on this role. But the whole time that I've been a teacher in that building, we've had the English Public Board and the French Public Board work in the same building, functioning together seamlessly. Sports teams, we just have one sports team with students from both boards. When I first started, teachers were shared between the 2 boards. Like if they had a Spanish teacher and we didn't have one, that person could come over, teach our students. Phys ed the other way, all these things. So it worked seamlessly. It was wonderful. We used to tout it everywhere we went. But just last spring, the French Public Board, it was announced that they just received, I think it was $18 or $19 million to build a new building. So to move out, basically. So we will have in our small community of 13,000 in West Nipissing, 6,000 in Sturgeon, we'll have potentially 3 high schools when we can't even
Fill one.
one. If you put them all together, it'd be one school. It'd be fine. Yeah.
In rural Canada, in particular, you could put all 4 school boards, elementary and secondary, into one school, but even if you had to have 2 schools, 1 elementary and 1 secondary school, and then the students would benefit because, as Parker just said, they'd have more programs to choose from, especially at secondary school, because it's all about numbers and the pupil-teacher ratio.
But this happened in Mattawa, didn't it, a few years back?
That was my second example.
Yeah, because it didn't, and the community actually, from my understanding, was they didn't really want it because it was actually dividing the community in a certain way. But this money came in for a brand new school, and
and that was the French Catholic system got the new building, but it exists today. I just heard last week that they have in that building, it's a elementary and secondary students in the building, and they only have 21 secondary students in the building.
And to compound that, there are still students today as we speak getting on the bus in the morning going to North Bay schools. Whereas if you had one school and you had more programs and you had the bigger gym and all these things that you would have in that different scale of operation, they would probably stay and not get on the bus. So there's more efficiencies because they wouldn't go to North Bay.
So my question, I know many teachers, I think very educated, very smart people around this table, excluding myself. So that seems, why aren't teachers and stepping forward and going, this isn't best for the kids, what's happening here, especially in rural settings like.
Yeah, well, I would argue they are. Certainly my members. Of course, I don't represent Catholic teachers, so again, I don't think Catholic teachers want their system to disappear. But my members, this is a conversation we have in the staff room all the time. Like, we see the school down the street gets this or gets that, and why don't we do that together? We can't offer a football team, but if we were together, we would. I mean, all kinds of things like that. Appropriate shop classes and access to technology. That would all be improved with this kind of consolidation. And of course, as I've identified, OSSTF, the union that represents public secondary school teachers and education workers, we have a broad spectrum of job classes we represent. But our policy position is there should only be one system. So I think we are advocating, and my members individually discuss it often and talk about it. And I'm here today talking about it as their representative. But
well, it's a top. If you think about it as a top down, the bottom that is not the bottom. The top down, the down is not the bottom. It's the students and the teachers are the most important part, and they need to go to the top. And this is the only way we can do that, by looking for efficiencies.
Sports aren't just what we do, they're who we are. Source for Sports North Bay is your advocate, your local support system, and your biggest fan. 1321 Fisher Street has grown from a place where knowledgeable experts can help you find exactly the gear you need, to the hotbed of team uniforms, apparel and fanwear, to a community stronghold for all the things that truly matter to you and your family's sports journey. We love helping you find your first pair of skates, as much as we relish supporting local leagues, teams, and athletes. Wherever your sports journey takes you, make sure you visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street so we can help you along your way.
Do you have any statistics as far as the financial imbalance for the run in the public system per student to the other systems? Because I've noticed that there's about 2 million students in the system altogether, 1.3 or so public, right? And so, but I've heard in the past that the public system is not getting its fair share.
Well, it's called core education funding. It used to be called the GSN. And so since 2018 by inflation and otherwise, that has shrunk per pupil because it's all based on enrollment. But you started out by saying, that the Catholic system is winning the way in recruitment and things in some places, I guess. But so there is that difference, and of course in the many boards in the Ontario Public School Board Association, we belong to, Near North School Board, a lot of them are running deficit budgets.
Yeah, about 40% of the boards, as according to information I gathered from my provincial organization, 40% of the boards are running a deficit this coming year, and the public boards. I can't speak to the Catholic boards, but so the Catholic system has about a third of the students in the province of Ontario, and the public board has about 2/3. Now, I mean, I've been pretty strong with OSSTF's position here, one school board. But even if you don't shift the model, there are, as Bill's motion alludes to, there are areas where we could improve. And again, the sharing of the building in my home school. I mean, now there's going to be 2 buildings that require maintenance to both buildings, the construction costs for a new one, all of these things. When there's perfectly appropriate space in the school in Sturgeon, and again, they made the shift in Mattawa already. So, but they were sharing the space there too, and it was working. I don't know if the community had an uproar about being divided, but it makes sense. And in small communities, you can't have these divisions because they're too small to survive those kind of things, in a good way. So I would suggest that there are efficiencies without eliminating the Catholic system. And again, OSSTF has members that work in the Catholic system, education workers. So we have EAs and the like, who are employees of Catholic school boards in this province.
So I know you can't speak on behalf of other unions or other teachers, but would I'll say teachers in other boards be interested in amalgamation?
I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but there would certainly be benefit for the 2 French systems, Catholic system and the public system, to share services, amalgamate services, whatever, share space. And that's, again, certainly what our policy alludes to, one system with French and English branches, basically 2 systems, but the elimination of the religious component, which is, again, goes against the nature of our multicultural Ontario, right?
So let's just say in something like this happened. It's massive if it did, but if it happened, you're not saying to eliminate the religious piece of it, because you could have potentially core subjects for Catholic studies.
Exactly.
Right? You're saying exactly. Sure. Parker's nodding back and forth.
Again, my organization advocates for a secular system, and so we don't think a particular religious group should be able to have access to student body to teach a particular religion. That said, I've personally taught a course on religion, but it's of all religions, so that students can learn to appreciate and understand the religions of the religions of the world, and take from that knowledge and be able to make informed choices about their own personal lives. But
so that's on the union side. You feel a little bit differently, though, Bill.
Well, again, I don't have a big brain, but this is like today. We're starting the conversation to find out about these things and where we can go and how we can do this efficiently.
Right.
And so, again, I don't have the answers. And again, it's about starting this conversation. And it's, again, I think given what Parker said at the beginning and what I think both of you said, that the diversity of the province, that we can do this. They do it in most jurisdictions in Canada. And so Ontario is one of them that has the 4 school board system.
I mean, we've done recent polling, and we've done polling throughout the years of my involvement in OSSTF, but recent polling in the last year that says 70% of Ontarians are supportive of an idea of one system. Yeah, so, I mean, the majority is there. The strong, I think you alluded to the strong lobby.
We have a provincial election that's just been announced. It's going to be coming up very much.
This feels like a Doug Ford issue.
Well, it feels like something everybody's going to run from, because this isn't something that is easy and it's sexy. It's got all kinds of sharp edges. You mentioned in your materials you provided us, there was an example of, was that a public school board creating space for a Muslim prayer?
No, it was a Catholic school board.
That was a Catholic school
Catholic
board.
school, I should say.
So it was Catholic school board making room for Muslims to be part of their system?
And a Catholic student has, in court of law, has challenged that they don't have to take the religious course of study through the Catholic, and won. That's just one student. But again, it goes to what Parker just said about the 70%. People are thinking, yeah, we need. How can you not think about passing resources on to students and teachers by looking at efficiency? How can you not think about that? Especially, again, our two local examples where you'd have more programs for, particularly in the secondary school, and they'd have just the same as a big urban school in Toronto. And other centers that have the population.
And an important part that's missing in the public system and probably the other boards as well, and we're just realizing it, we've come away from having really good shop teaching, really good skills trade. We need to improve that for all. So if you have an efficient way to go about it. You mentioned that there's a moratorium on school closures, and that if that was lifted, maybe that would give room for some consolidation and some cooperation?
That was my example as an efficiency approach. When and if that ever is lifted, that would mean if School Board X or Y would want to have a new school, they would work together, and the government might then, rather than discipline or something, or thou shalt, they if you want to present a business case, you'd get perhaps a bigger school or more school amenities like shops and other things like that. So that was my example of where that school boards in the future could look at that.
Yeah, so
together.
The provincial legislation would require cooperation to move forward with any expansion.
It would be kind of like
consolidation.
Be another one of those Bill 98 things.
Right.
It's interesting as taxpayers, we're always saying, oh, well, different government organizations could be run a whole lot more efficient if we just, but I've been personally involved when my kids were younger. What was it called when they were consolidating some schools in the near north? There was an
ARC process.
ARC process. So I was involved in that a little bit. It was a nightmare. Like it was like, and then I'll say from a public standpoint, it was sort of like, people didn't want their school closed. Like nobody wants their school closed. So we talk about efficiencies and all those different things. The painful part to get there, where when you start making these efficiencies, people want the status quo, even though it's costing them a fortune. I don't. I'm just making a statement here, I guess. But it's like, as long as let's have all the efficiencies, as long as it's not my kid's school.
And one of the problems is when we do have these shrinkages and demographic transitions, we do close schools and then we consolidate and we put kids on buses. And today is the third time in less than a week, third time in a week we've had school canceled because the school buses can't go because it's too cold or snow or there's a flake on the road or something like that.
You're really poking the bear on that one.
Well, really, it's
another topic.
We're not even designed well for when students can't get to the school, right? And you think COVID would have created some type of system where school's not open, but school is in, right?
And being a person that when I was in elementary school and high school, traveled on a bus an hour and a half each way to Sturgeon from River Valley, Ontario, I am certainly not supporting the idea that we bus kids great distances just for efficiency. There is value in small community schools. Schools are community hubs. They're used for more than just the 9 to 3:30 education component of their role. They're used after hours by the local community. The community libraries, you have FJ McGilligan in Mattawa. The community library is housed within the building. So there are a lot of ways to use the facilities in a more efficient way with many of the buildings. But I mean, here in North Bay, there was a Catholic school and a public school facing each other. I think the public school was closed down eventually, but they were, as I understand it, were both under-enrolled. So I mean, So you're looking across the street. You have two buildings across the street from each other, under-enrolled, and suffering financially, right?
Sorry, it reminded me of something I wanted to poke Bill about, and just talking about efficiencies in using facilities. What's going on with Whitfield Secondary School that was closed down and is not being used properly?
Well, that's off topic, but that's a school that we have to keep, and the ministry says so, because we have other things going on in our community that will probably eventually will move to Whitfield, that will, for our own consolidations and efficiency, that we'll be able to do that. So
you're saving it for future efficiencies?
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's a well kept school and has all the facilities, and we have other school communities within our community that would benefit from being amalgamated there.
Excellent example, then. Really, I caught the probably eventually part, though. That's what I would put in quotes there if I was writing that headline.
I'm gonna get calls from my former Whitfield teachers saying, "I heard Steer on this podcast saying Whitfield was a good building. Why'd they close it?"
Well, it is a good building, and let's go back to the history. You asked it, Scott. Was that the recommendation from staff at the time was to go from 3 to 1 high school
by staff.
By staff, and then that was over. The trustees did not agree with that, and that caused the war between 3 schools. And of course, eventually, Whitfield got I guess we'll call it the short straw, the short stick. And whereas today, going back to what we just said about efficiency, we would probably had one brand new school somewhere in the city, amalgamating the 3, a super school with all the shops, all the mental health services, all in one spot, and everyone would be a lot happier and far more efficient.
I wrote that it should be right beside Michelle, actually, at the time. I said, if you're going to do that, you may as well do it out there. Then you have the sports fields.
Why just move everybody to Powassan, Dave? It's like,
we're all going to amalgamate eventually.
The land's cheaper there.
I said it should go, other than a little increased distance, I said it should go right across in Nipissing and Canada, and they'd walk across the street upon graduation, go into the trades, go into college, go into university. More efficiency.
I kind of like that.
And that's where they should have put the dome. So and then you'd have arenas, domes, everything should have been up there. We'd have a real integrated service-based community.
Imagine.
So going back to this initial motion that you put forward, what are you asking really in that motion? I know we were talking maybe big, that like to have all school boards come together, but what are you asking in this motion?
Asking to start that conversation, that perhaps that the government will conduct a study to look at these kinds of things that we've talked about today, and see where, as you said earlier, for a Doug Ford issue, to roll up his sleeves and do something about it, so the students and teachers will benefit more from this. We can still honor all these obligations we have in society and do this under less roofs, where we can have the new roofs, I guess, but at the same time, under the existing roofs, we can move young minds and people and resources so they have a higher quality, I think, educational experience.
I mean, jobs in education, and obviously that's a concern as a union representative. Our suggestion that there be one school board, our other point to that is that no jobs should be lost, because currently funding's based on enrollment. So unless a bunch of students are disappearing when we amalgamate the system, if we amalgamated the systems, there should be no job losses. So my Catholic counterparts would have jobs. It just wouldn't be Catholic teachers. They'd be teachers.
Would we not have a little bit smaller footprint at the top end as far as directors and assistant directors and executive directors, and that's where a lot of the cream is, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you'd have a director, and then you'd have associates probably representing all the vested interests, but still it would be far more efficient.
You had an example that the province was willing to overhaul health, and they studied health and did that. So basically, that's what you're asking them to do: is start a process where you really take a hard look at what you have and how you can make it better.
Yeah, health is not perfect, but it was a start.
My concern about that approach is that healthcare's gone to a privatized model in some instances.
Hence circling back to the John Tory misstep is that he was trying to leverage the feeling that people wanted private academy type styles, teachings and school boards to suit each religion, right? So, and that's how you break it down, is that if you break it down, you break it into a sort of fee-for-service private boards.
In Alberta, it's like the charter school approach somewhat. There's themes to their, and money is given out to those themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be very leery. Privatizing, it's popular, especially with conservative governments, but then you have to roll in the profit part of the equation, and that just takes resources away from students in the classroom.
That's that same layer of school board, for school board layer of executives that is a bit of the cream. That's the same as the profit part of it. I think we can look south of the border for an example of what happens with education when you do this. They're doing the same thing there, leaning towards public money going towards other school boards that are competing against each other. And that you're just going to fraction everything just like their healthcare system.
Yeah, and the haves and have-nots really show themselves in that way, right? People who can afford to pay for private schools and education, they have great schools. Mm-hmm. But the communities who can't afford them suffer greatly because the public dollars are cut back because the taxpayers are directing their money. Each taxpayer would direct through a voucher system or a charter system, direct their money to the private sector that they're interested in. So, yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up, and because it's such a huge issue, and I'm really glad that we're talking about it. I want to learn more about it.
I think we should probably, we have the intention of looking at the other sides and maybe having future podcasts with panels from the other school boards to talk about how they see the issue and how it could be solved.
It'd be, I'd be curious to see if we could get, because the public board's massive, right? It's huge. It's the majority. Why would they want to talk about it when they have their autonomy?
Well, it'd have to be an issue where they'd like to get their point across, and that's what we want, is everybody have straight up sort of perspectives to consider. So it would be a matter if discussion takes any type of goes viral, or at least people start thinking about it. Well, we have really tough economic situations going forward.
Oh, yeah.
We all know that. And this is, Doug Ford is framing this election as being able to unite to fight the forces of Trumpism and tariffs, right? Well, that's because we can't afford any more hits to our economy here. We're having a hard time. He's having a hard time balancing budgets. There's mega projects going on with lots of money going on. He wants to give tax relief. Well, you're going to have to find the money somewhere. So where are we going to find it? Education is one of the biggest budget items in the provincial budget.
Can I just make 2 points before we wrap up? Yeah.
Please.
So, I mean, to that end, I think it's important to recognize, and this is a peace offering, an olive branch to my Catholic colleagues. Ontario's education system is world class. World class. I mean, we briefly touched on the U.S. systems. U.S. education quality is not, generally speaking, as good as Ontario's or Canada's overall. So that's kudos to the education workers and the teachers that are involved with students on a day-to-day basis and the way we do things. So we're talking a lot about what's broken. There's a lot of good stuff going on in education. And I think parents and communities should recognize that and recognize the people involved in education care about their kids, want the best for their kids, are working hard to make things go well. The second point is we've talked about the cost of education. I think we should reframe that conversation with terminology that dollars put into education is an investment. And the Conference Board of Canada did a study, and I would say the Conference Board of Canada is not some left-leaning organization. They're going to look at the dollars and cents. They've said for every dollar invested in education, there's a $1.30 return. So that's a pretty good return. I'd take 30% return any day of the week on my personal investments. So I think that's important too. The money that goes into education cannot just be seen as an expense, as a cost. It's an investment that pays back and pays back more.
Yeah, I think we should study this investment because we'll have a better return if we look for those efficiencies.
And I have a nephew who's just got into education, and his soon-to-be fiance, if he's listening, and what I hear today, it's very different than when my buddies got into education. And how does the union or the board help support the additional resources that are required today to actually function in the education system? I'm going to talk about EAs. I don't know. Are they in the union? They are.
In my union, yes.
Oh, but not...
Well, education workers, we have about 20,000 of our 60,000 members that are education workers, approximately. But education workers also are part of CUPE, Canadian Union of Public Employees, and OPSU. So when they decided they wanted to be unionized, you can choose, and unions make their pitch.
So I was under the impression that they aren't even close to being paid what an educator will be paid. That was, and again, this is anecdotal what I'm hearing, but the work that they have to do is like beyond what people should have to do day in and day out.
Yeah. So the pay that teachers receive and educational workers receive, yes, there is a difference. Some of that difference is based on the qualifications you need to hold the role, as well as the responsibilities. Ultimately, the teacher's responsible for the safety and well-being and the educational advancement of students in the classroom. EAs are a big part of the education system, and I highly respect their work. Their education level is not the same as the teachers, and their supporting role for the teacher and the students in the classroom, not for the teacher, but for the classroom setting, and they work as part of the team. But again, ultimately, the buck stops with the teacher with reference to student success. And the safety of students.
It just sounds like today, just what I hear anecdotally, it's like I don't think one can even operate without the other nowadays in the school setting of what's happening.
I know our time's running out, but I mean, just one issue that's just running rampant in the school system is violence in the schools, and it's taking a toll on all job classes within the system. Teachers and education workers, but especially education workers, are facing violence and seeing violence on a daily basis. And I have education assistant colleagues who are off now because they were attacked at school and injured.
Wow.
And we just last week, OSSTF hosted a Safe at School Summit, inviting all the stakeholders to come together to talk about violence in schools, and we put out a white paper about that. But it's a huge problem that needs to be dealt with, and it sucks up resources.
Yeah,
when you have to deal with violent incidents and lost time injuries, and dealing with students, getting them the supports they need to help adjust their behaviors. There are costs to that, and if we can get on top of the violence in schools issue, there's an economic component that can be beneficial too.
Sure.
There are 31 public school boards in the province of Ontario. Just came back from what's called the Public Education Symposium in Toronto, and I'm on the board of directors of that, as appointed by our Near North District School Board. But I asked that question as per the motion to the sitting MPP education critics, and the next day to the main party political strategists, and because I wanted an answer, would you consider conducting a study? And of course, the answer from everyone was good idea, but as we started out this whole conversation today, was not going to touch it. But I did hear one, and it came from the conservative strategist. He said, once the financial reviews and audits are done, and of course this government really responds well to money and efficiencies and those kinds of things, there may be a glimmer of hope where there'll be something where they'll start the conversation, and it'll be something that the four boards can look at to make it better for teachers and students in the classroom.
They needed to be their idea to make it work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Parker.
Parker Robinson, representative for the unions around or not all unions, for the teachers union.
OSSTF, Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation.
Bill Steers, a trustee with the Near North District School Board. This is a great conversation and great idea, Dave. Like, you're absolutely right. If they think it's a bad idea, other school boards, let's have a conversation about that. And why is it a bad idea?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You've been listening to another Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale. Please like, share, and please provide your comments about what we've been talking about. That helps us and helps others understand the other perspectives.